Joel Calafell.
Wow.
Do you know this gentleman?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
He's from the Barcelona area.
Oh, wow.
That's not close here. I don't know if you knew that. Barcelona, New Jersey. There's an ocean in between them.
Yeah, it's cool, though. A lot of our IQs are happening outside of the country now. And it's small, but there is an outside of America attendance to these invitationals now.
Joe Calafell is a Grand Prix champion. Worlds in Rome. He started 6-0. I remember that because he played Turbo Fog in the All Jund Worlds. And at Grand Prix Barcelona in 2010, when I was globetrotting, when I was in the Pro Tour, globetrotting with Jerry Thompson, I took a trip from Barcelona to Seattle, Seattle to Honolulu, and then back home to Purdue that summer. And Joel Calafell let me borrow cards.
Very nice.
From a Kifkin deck. What a nice man.
And we know how that worked out.
And now he is here in the States, 4-1 with Jund Planeswalkers, flying very far under the radar. There was a sincere wow factor when I saw him on the screen. I didn't even know he was in attendance this weekend. So this is really, really cool. Kind of the reach that the Open Series and our IQ circuit is having.
Magic is a small world.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. So Calafell's playing Jund Walkers, Mann is playing Jund Monsters. Now, of course, that means that Calafell has all those Planeswalkers in his deck. 4 copies of Xenagos the Reveler, 2 copies of Chandra Power Master, of Vraska the Unseen, 3 copies of Nissa Worldwaker.
And generally speaking, I really like the way that Stephen Mann constructs his decks. This weekend, no exception. No messing around with 1s and 2s and all these weird numbers. No, we have 4 Dreadboards, 4 Mizium Mortars, 4 Xenagos, 4 Nissa, 4 Polukranos, 4 Courser, 4 Caryatid, 4 Mystic, 2 Gorkline Rampager, 2 Scavenging Ooze. Very straightforward, very streamlined list.
So, he's kind of a mix as he's going to play a Courser between Monsters and Planeswalkers, where Calafell is just straight up walkers. He's got, Elvish Mystic, Courser, a couple copies of Scavenging Ooze in his main deck, Caryatid, but he is more of the Walker style deck.
And 0 copies of Domri in his list.
For Mann?
For Stephen Mann,
Yep.
yeah.
I can't say I'm too surprised. I actually feel like Domri is pretty poorly positioned right now.
It does seem like one of the cards that most regularly underperforms when I watch the list in action. It does have moments of being very good, but I think in metagames where the minus power isn't that exciting, it's not a card that really belongs in decks like Jund Monsters.
Calafell will cast Mizium Mortars and then eat it with the Scavenging Ooze. Gain a little bit of life, and I imagine he'll come across for 3 in just a moment. So there that is. And maybe a little Elvish Mystic action as well, yes sir. And now he's at that flashpoint where Planeswalkers are certainly realistic. Now what you did mention is notable. Mann has 4 copies of Dreadboard in his deck.
Yeah, he has outs to these sort of scenarios. 4 Mortars as well.
Copy of Polukranos. Does join the battlefield for Mann. Calafell will draw a card. Looked like he picked up a copy of Mizium Mortars for the turn. That won't take down the 5/5. Looks like he may have a copy of Rakdos' Return as well. That could be pretty pivotal, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, he can go to knock out Steven's hand right here. The Polukranos is still troubling, but the only 4 mana in play might be far away from doing anything too significant with it.
Oh, that will be for 4, so there goes the grip. Now, of course, no attack here for the Ooze, but you see that Calafell will take a look to see what creatures do you have in the graveyard for my Ooze to eat. He does have some.
Yeah, even if Steven rips a 5th land right now, that still can't fight the Ooze. And then the following turn, Joel's going to be able to eat the creatures that are in Steven's graveyard and push the Ooze even further away.
Jund Walkers is a deck that is picking up in popularity. Again, 2 top 8 the Pro Tour in Portland a couple weeks back. Ishikawa and Mandan. And then we actually had 2 top 8 last weekend when we were in DC. One of them, Eric Smith.
It is the type of deck that a lot of Magic players like to play. Broad-based answers, a lot of swingy, splashy cards. No surprise, and the deck's good too. No surprise to see it really popular.
So now Mann's going to have to draw really well as his resources have been taken away from him. He will activate Polukranos, win the fight over Elvish Mystic, but that'll give Calafell another creature in the graveyard to eat with the Ooze.
And Mann's behind in life totals too, so it's not like he's in a position to race with this Polukranos. It's just on defense right now. That's a really tough position to take against the Scavenging Ooze with pretty stocked graveyards, and Calafell with all sorts of powerful draws. I mean, Vraska, Putrefy, anything that allows him to break through this Polukranos, and Mann may not be able to catch up.
And he's going to take 2 here from the Overgrown Tomb. And this is a Dreadboard to get that off of the table. Now he gets to activate this Ooze a bunch. Get your creatures out of the graveyard, gain 3 life, up to 22. And a bash it for 6. Not a bad turn.
Yeah, that Rakdos return really crippled Steven, and then Joel was able to handle the leftovers. Not sure that Steven can catch up at this point, even though he has drawn a Pelucranos. That's going to be basically on chump block duty.
Mann's other card in his hand right now is a copy of Nissa. Calafell looks like he's going to fire up Mutavault, kind of a free attack here. As Pelucranos is on chump block news, so the 2 damage is going to come across there. And the follow-up play here for Calafell is a boring old Sylvan Caryatid before passing the turn back over to Mann, who will draw a card, and he will pick up his permanent. So Joel Calafell is going to even things up here against Stephen Mann. Jun Walkers versus Jun Monsters headed to a 3rd game.
Pretty slow pacing to the game so far, or to the match rather. Stephen Mann's a pretty methodical player.
Yep.
So not too surprising that even though this matchup is, you know, we're not talking about Sphinx's Revelation and Dissolves and all that kind of stuff, that we're approaching the 20-minute mark in this matchup.
We will take a look at the sideboards here, and as we do, we will start with Stephen Mann's. You'll see 4 copies of Mistcutter Hydra, 3 Chandra Pyromaster, 2 Rakdos' Return, 2 Ultimate Price, and 4 copies of Magma Spray. What are you liking against the old Planeswalkers deck?
I think the Rakdos returns are very good. You know, Joel's deck, a lot of Planeswalkers, no counter spells. So Rakdos return is about as well suited there as it really gets. The rest of the sideboard, I'm not a huge fan of. I think the Chandras are fine to bring in, as Joel's deck is not very good at attacking Planeswalkers himself. There are Elvish Mystics that Steven can clean up, and I think the 0 power on Chandra can be potent in this matchup. Besides that, there's not a lot to like. I mean, he can bring in the Ultimate Prices. He's seen Scavenging Ooze. He's seen Corsair Crewfix and so forth, but not, you know, the fight's going to be likely about over Planeswalkers, or it's going to be over Rakdos Return, and creature removal does not fit in very well into that kind of game.
On the other side of things here, we've got 2 Magma Sprays, no World Connections, 2 Drown in Sorrows, 1 Anger of the Gods, 3 Mistcutter Hydra, 2 Thoughtseize, 1 Duress, 1 Rakdos' Return, and 2 copies of Doomblade. What do you see there?
I like the Rakdos return quite a bit. I think the 2 Doomblades are fine. I think the Underworld connections can be reasonable here, but you know, again, it's not going to be a ton of sideboarding. The base of Joel's deck is pretty well set up for the games already. It's creatures that are tough to kill or are largely expendable, and then creature removal and Planeswalkers. So there aren't huge upgrades for him to make in the matchup.
I talked about that Grand Prix in Barcelona that Calafell lent me cards at. It was actually in 2009, not 2010.
Okay.
I do want to make sure I get my year right on that, and he won the tournament.
Sure.
So just want to make sure I get that right. Give credit where credit is due.
Good things happen to nice people. Sometimes the world makes sense. You know,
Yeah.
it can happen.
I got a cool 59th place. That was fun. That's 1 pro point.
It is.
Nice.
I don't want to say it's impossible to believe, because of course it's possible to believe.
Okay.
But we aren't, in terms of years, that far removed from you flying to Europe in pursuit of pro points.
Yes. I know.
Yeah, it's pretty.
That was one heck of a summer, I'll tell you
crazy.
what. Calafell won that tournament for you historians out there with the Cascade Swans of Bryn Argoyle and Seismic Assault deck. That is actually, I don't want to say that's where that deck debuted, because it actually ended up, I believe, qualifying someone via regionals, but that was where the deck was still kind of a secret. I remember I went to that tournament with Jerry Thompson, Luis Scott Vargas, Paulo Vito Damaderosa, and some others, and Jerry and I believe Luis both played the deck. I believe Paulo played Fairies in that tournament, but I would want to make sure. Actually, no, Paulo played Cascade Swans as well. And there was one other person, actually it was Sam Black, who played Fairies, and he top 8'd. There were some players there in search of Grand Prix points.
Clearly.
Yeah. Tim Landale as well. We didn't even know, we didn't know that he was going. We saw him on Friday doing a side event draft, and we said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Searching for points, I guess.
Yeah, when I was asked, what are you doing here in Sydney, I gave an answer, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I don't even know how to begin to answer that question.
Yeah. It was a fun weekend, I tell you what.
59th place flying to Barcelona that's basically the perfect finish.
Also, Pro Tour Kuala Lumpur. The winner of that was John Finkel. Joel Calafell was in the top 8 of that tournament.
Wow.
So he's an accomplished mage with a handful of Grand Prix top 8s and a Pro Tour top 8. So Again, I am as surprised just as you are to see him here, but that just kind of shows the outreach of, stuff like Game Day, which is worldwide, and our IQs as well, which, are giving flights now, I believe, to overseas competitors to be able to come to this tournament. So it is awesome to see a player like Joe Calafell be able to make it out to this tournament and having some success as well, as Mann starts off with an Elvish Mystic.
I like the international flavor of the tournaments. We need more of it.
Calafell giving his hand a long look. He will start with a Temple of Malice. We'll see what he wants to do with this card. Looks like it's going to go towards the bottom. So passing the turn back over to Mann. Now, of course, what's always scary when you do play against Gen monsters is them accelerating into large threats before you can catch up.
The turn 1 Mann accelerant feels like the most critical part of the matchup on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you get out on the front foot, your planeswalkers, your creatures, they're all so much more powerful.
Mann is going to take one. So this is a Sylvan Caryatid. Back to Calafell we go. He will draw a mystery card as he scryed his top card to the bottom from the temple. There's a forest. That's a Caryatid here for Calafell as well. But he is behind on mana, as Mann will have access to maybe 5 mana on turn 3 if he has a land to play.
Yeah, it looks like he has no 5th land, but a couple of coursers, a couple of Nisses in hand. Could really break this game wide open if he's able to find some mana.
And can't forget about that Mizium Mortars as well. A bit of a problem solver there. Mann is going to attack for 1. I actually like this attack quite a bit. His deck does have Gore-Clan Rampager in it. You don't know if Calafell has seen it yet, as we did join this game in game number 2. But you saw Calafell actually ask, okay, well, how many cards do you have? It is just 1 point of damage. What's the big deal?
Well, they all add up.
They sure do. You can definitely tell that Calafell has some interest in blocking here.
Yeah, the question is, how much worse is this Rampager for me down the line, Sometimes even if it's bad, you still got to make the block, but Mann paid off there with a free point of damage.
Now Mann will take 1. This is a Courser of Grufix. And a Sylvan Caryatid is the top card of his deck. So all Mann can do is pass the turn back over to Calafell. Mann got his 1 point of damage through. We'll see if that ends up mattering in the long run. Calafell, you see a Temple of Abandon in his hand. Also an Overrun Tomb hanging out over there yet. It's not really at that flashpoint for Planeswalkers. 5 mana is normally that. Of course, he can deploy a card like Xenagos this turn if he does have it. We'll see what he comes up with.
Mann has missed a land drop here, so there is also an argument of potentially trying to attack Steven's mana as well. So you consider something like killing an Elvish Mystic, hoping that Mann doesn't find a land on top, maybe killing the Courser the following turn, and trying to cut off Steven of his more powerful plays.
There's a Dreadbore on the Courser, and Calafell's able to make that play because he knows that Mann is not going to draw a land. So there's Sylvan Caryatid that's added. Now, things get really interesting here, I think, because if you're Mann, do you play the Caryatid to generate mana, or do you play the Courser, maybe get a little greedy?
Yeah, the high upside play here is playing the Courser. I think that I prefer Courser in this spot. Just go for broke. I mean, even if you miss, you still get to attack with the elf this turn, which is small, but it's still a little bit. And the problem is that you're also going to be kind of choked going forward on your mana because you have so many 5s in your hand.
Looks like Mann is just going to attack with the elf, deploy the Caryatid, and pass the turn back. So he feels as though getting that mana is very important, as he does have 2 copies of Nissa Worldwaker in his hand.
Although now Joel is starting to get into Mizium Mortars territory. Another thing to look out for. 3 copies in his main deck as well, so very likely they're still in his deck in some number.
Calafell going to take his time, figure out what the best course of action here. He's got a Nissa in his hand as well, but it's not great in this situation.
I mean, it's not shabby. He has some sort of follow-up. You know, he can plus and get a little bit of mana back. If he has some follow-up by plussing, I think it's a pretty good setup.
There's no room 2 men to play tapped. Now this is a Xenagos the Reveler. So looks like this is going to make a Satyr token, and it does. I'm just going to pass the turn back. Man will draw a card. It's a Dreadbore. Does he want to cast that, or does he want to cast his Nissa? Decisions.
I mean, the Nissa is not that exciting on this board.
Not really at all.
You know, he has to tap down entirely. It's susceptible to getting attacked the follow-up turn by the Satyr token and, you know, presumably another Satyr token that Joel makes. And is this setup ever bad if Joel has a Busy Mortars in his hand?
Can Man even beat Busy Mortars at this point? I think that's a real question.
Yeah, no, he may not just be able to beat it, period.
He's going to go with the Courser. Copy of Pelucranos on top. That's not a land. Might be time to just cast that Dreadbore on that Xenagos. You have to feel. I feel like if you're Man, you're kind of scared of what Calafell's setting up because it feels like he's setting something up.
For sure. There's also just the question of, is your mana going to be tied up doing other things for a really long time? This might be the best spot to cast the Dreadbore just from a mana efficiency standpoint.
So after the Dreadbore does take care of the Xenagos, back to Calafell we do go. Urborg was the draw for the turn. And that's kind of an interesting symmetrical draw, but nothing too crazy there.
And I had to imagine Joel does not have the Mortars because we would have just seen that land put into play and that Mortars cast.
Mm-hmm. So what to do if you're Calafell? It looks like he does have a Nissa in his hand.
Being the first one to get Nissa into play and to start, you know, generating some tokens is not a bad spot to be in either.
There's some real decisions here.
Yeah, this is these games are tough.
I think he also has a copy of Underworld Connections in his hand. You know, what's the best way to use that? Do you even cast that this turn? Can you afford to?
Also, what's going on in Steven's hand? You know he's been missing land drops too.
Looks like the answer is yes. Now he will draw right away. So down to 16 goes Calafell. Temple of Malice is the draw. So he will play that. It's time to scry. Did not get a great look at it. Looked a lot like Mizzium Mortars.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
I'm getting that sense.
Yeah. Back to Man we go. Man's going to draw the Pelucranos. Top card. Still not a land. A copy of Mizzium Mortars. That information very important for Calafell.
And if this is a Mortars on top of Joel's deck, it's going to be really hard for Man to win from here.
And he's going to have to do it with Pelucranos, basically. And that's if he deploys it this turn. Attack for 2. Pretty quick block. Not scared of Rampager anymore.
Yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure that Joel's happy if Steven were to suspend his whole turn doing that, because then he untaps Mortars, strands the Pelucranos, plus whatever else is going on in Steven's hand.
Probably pretty safe to take him off of that card, too, when you've seen a couple of cards from Courser. Not impossible for Man to have it there, but rather unlikely. That's why you see the block from the Grand Prix Barcelona champion. Calafell very quickly drew his card. And it was a copy of Mizzium Mortars, and it looks like he's going to come into the red zone here, maybe. Maybe try to entice a block.
Yeah, I think he's going to hope to get the Pelucranos here, but I think it's very unlikely that Steven takes the bait there.
Blood Crypt will come into play tapped. This will be 6 mana. That'll be Mizzium Mortars with Overload. And now this attack is perfectly free.
Sure.
If you'd like to trade, by all means. But
Yeah,
man declines.
He knows that the man's drawing a mortar, so might as well attack. Can't block, so.
Calafell sitting at a pretty comfortable 16 as well. His Immortals will take care of that Satyr token. In comes Pelucranos. Calafell's going to go down to 11, and that'll be man's turn. So Calafell will untap. He's got a Connections in play. Draws a card for the turn.
Yeah, he's got a commanding edge here. Can he find the last piece to sweep up what Steven has left over? Just some removal spell for Pelucranos, or even just a steady stream of chump blockers.
Down to 10. Temple of Abandon was the draw. Does have that Nissa in hand. Looks like he's actually got 2 copies of the World Waker.
And Joel has to respect the possibility of Rampager too. It's not just about what's on the board here. Could be quite a bit of trample damage coming over, especially since, you know, Man did a really good job of representing Rampager several turns ago.
There's her board. Three, 4, 5. This is Nissa. That will tick up, and this will be a 4-4. And he's getting aggressive.
He doesn't
In
want to
for
drag
4.
this out.
Yeah.
You know, while you have an opponent who can't really cast anything.
Attack's pretty quick block. There's some Mortars in the land, so a pretty decent exchange there for Man. I mean, he's only got 2 mana, but not a bad turn.
And now Joel can be pretty confident that there's no copies of Rampager in Steven's hand, because Steven almost certainly would have used its trample over onto Nissa rather than use the Mortars post-combat to take care of one of the lands.
See how aggressive Calafell wants to get here with making the 4/4s. He could, play this Nissa, use this Nissa, make a 4/4, and then play another one.
Yeah.
Make another 4/4 and get a little aggressive. He's going to activate Underworld Connections. He's still kind of looking for that removal spell to get the job done.
Yeah, there's still some chance that Steven could steal this one. Joel's got a commanding advantage, but it's not a lock.
And oddly enough, the card that we've talked about quite a bit that Man hasn't had yet, it is Rampager. That probably allows him to steal it.
Yeah, if it's gonna, I think that if Steven does win this game, it's gonna come down to that card.
And we'll play a little defense here, as Man does draw a card. It's a copy of Stomping Ground. However, you can see Man's hand. He's got a backup Pelucranos, 2 copies of Nissa World Waker. And that will be a block maybe. Calafell might be perfectly fine with letting this go. Yep, because he has a backup Nissa in his hand. Stomping Ground coming to play tapped, and that'll be Man's turn. So Calafell sitting at 9 as he goes to his next turn. Drew a copy of Xenagos. And that may be good enough.
Yeah, if Steven does not find a copy of Gorklan Rampager, it's almost certainly good enough.
The Temple comes down, a little scry action there. Now it's time to draw a card. Calafell will draw. Did not get a great look at it. It's a copy of Rakdos' Return, not bad. That'll speed things up.
Yeah, he can hit for 4 this turn. Play conservatively by using a Planeswalker to generate a blocker. Assume that's good enough to get out of the turn, and then follow up next turn with a lethal attack plus Rakdos Return.
Just needs to make sure he does not die on this turn. There is Xenagos, a Reveler, will party its way into the battlefield. And it's back over to Man we go. Man will draw. That's a copy of Dreadbore. But unfortunately for Man, that might be a little too late at this point.
Yeah, it's hard for him to beat both Xenagos and a 4/4 from this spot.
And for Calafell, there's only so many cards you have to play around.
And Joel with that Rakdos Return on the top of the deck too, I think that's... I mean, even this attack on the Planeswalker, again,
You can just let it go.
Yeah. So I think it still makes sense to block because you can just untap and make another token. But either way, it's fine.
Man asking how many cards Calafell has in his hand. If he wants to cast that Dreadbore, he'll have to take 1 to do so. So down to 6. Now here is Dreadbore to take out the creature.
And I believe this Rakdos Return will kill Steven at this stage.
A draw here is Xenagos. Does have a forest. You can see Mann hoping he's not dead yet. There's a Satyr token in for 2. And this is a Rakdos' return for the full amount. Joel Calafell is going to win this match over Stephen Mann. 2-1. Jund Planeswalkers will take down Jund Monsters. And for Calafell, a player I didn't even know was going to be here this weekend, he's 5-1.
Just a little too slow out of the gates there. Steven missing his land drop for the 3rd land drop there for Eternity. Had a couple of misses in his hand he couldn't deploy on time, and was just behind the entire time leading up to the point where Joel mortars away his entire board.
And hey, this isn't the first time that we have seen Mizzy and Mortars play a huge role in these Jund mirrors.
Yeah, it's not good in every single game, and sometimes the game is decided by Pelucnos or other large creatures. There's sometimes the game's all about Planeswalkers, doesn't really break in the way that you would like from Mizzy and Mortars, but in games like that where, you know, that's the ideal game. Steven's tight on lands, has a bunch of mana creatures, and an overloaded mortar sweeps away everything.